The Explore the Tropics event is in full swing now at Whole Foods Market. It's a celebration of tropical fruits throughout the store, starting with great deals on fresh, juicy seasonal produce. There's a new melty tropical heat pizza only at Whole Foods Market through March. And that famous mango yuzu chantilly cake is finally back in the bakery department. You'll also find tempting tropical marinated proteins in their meat and seafood departments. Explore the tropics today at Whole Foods Market.
Today on CityCast Portland, we're rounding up some headlines that caught our attention this week. Everything from bridges catching fire to the police not fully investigating DUIs. So joining us on the show is Willamette Week's City Hall reporter Sophie Peel and our lead producer John Notarianni. It's Friday, March 17th. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. Okay, so one question before we talk about the most interesting headlines this week is I really want to know what restaurants you guys miss most that have closed.
I'm a square and I almost never eat out, so I'm probably not the best person to ask. Yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay. You know what, Sophie?
That's really anticlimactic.
No, but really, this question is so...
I go to Freddy's and buy my groceries.
Really? So you don't ever eat out? See, that in itself is fascinating.
I do occasionally, but they're all still open.
Oh, really? Which ones do you go to? You're like Danny's,
what's the...
Red Robin.
Hot Yai is a favorite of mine.
Oh, Hot Yai's is great. Yeah, the fried chicken.
It's
really
Find me there.
John, what about you? What restaurant has left a hole in your heart?
I've been thinking about the Beach Street Parlor, which was this little restaurant and bar off of MLK and on Beach Street, of course. And it was one of those spots that was built into a house. Oh, that place was so great. You'd have music and they'd have DJs and they had food.
I used to DJ there.
Did you? Of course you did. Yeah. Yeah. And I was going to say, and it was always the coolest DJs, which is clearly why you were there. But I have heard rumors. That it might be reopening in a new iteration soon.
That would be amazing. Those sisters are amazing. Yeah. Well, the restaurant I miss, and I mean this on the daily, is the Overlook. I don't know if you guys ever heard of that. It's it was off Skidmore and Interstate in North Portland, and it was run by a Greek immigrant, and it was open for so long, 74, closed in 2018.
Yeah.
I just can't explain how amazing that restaurant was. Did you guys ever? I mean, Sophie, I know you did not go, but
nope,
I did.
But you went, right? Could you kind of explain the vibe?
That place was amazing. It was like a crazy giant Denny's, but they had fireplaces inside.
Yeah.
Right. I remember at one point I'd worked either super late. I think I'd worked an overnight shift, and I met up with a friend for breakfast there at 6 a.m. And it was, that place was.
Yeah. Everyone has Overlook stories. And what I loved is you go in and you just see all walks of life. It was definitely kind of made to be a trucker stop, available to truckers, but everybody was there. But I'm just I miss Overlook. But well, guys, thanks for hanging with me on that one. Sophie, why don't you go first? I'd love to hear the headline that caught your attention this week.
Yeah, I think everyone wrote about this because it was sort of a sensational headline and probably got a lot of clicks. But last week, firefighters responded to an on-ramp of the steel bridge on the west side. And, there was smoke seeping out of the creases of the cinder blocks that kind of form the base of the on-ramp. And, they sledgehammered in, they created 2 massive holes, and they found, a number of homeless camps underneath the on-ramp that was basically surrounded by cinder blocks. And one person who was living under there, they were admitted to the hospital for smoke inhalation. They were found unconscious. I actually don't know how that person's doing. But yeah, it was just, it was bizarre. The pictures of it just looks like a kind of an underground world. It made everyone wrote about it. I'm sure, I wouldn't be surprised if Fox News wrote about it because sometimes they pick the worst things ever that happen in Portland and they're like, it's a Portland thing.
Yeah. Tunnels. It kind of is though. Yeah. They got us. Tunnels are kind of a Portland thing.
Yeah, well, I think the most interesting thing, the pictures in of themselves were whoa, I mean, it really is, it's one of those things like you walk by there and you just never, you never think about it. It's like, why would you?
Hmm.
But what the Fire Bureau was saying is that, the city's going to start looking at other on-ramps to see if similar things are happening.
Yeah, do they know what started that fire?
I mean, I don't know. I know there were remnants of, cooking fires, and I don't know about heating fires, but I would imagine something like that. But I don't know. I mean, we know that, especially in recent years, like almost half the fires that firefighters respond to in this city are what they call homeless related fires. So either adjacent to or started by a cooking fire or warming fire. So, that's like half a firefighter's job these days is
Oh my
responding to those
God.
fires. And they can be really, they can be really deadly.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think about fires, and especially fires at homeless camps across the city. And obviously, this is a sort of sensational, strange version of it, where it's in this tunnel underneath a really notable part of Portland. But like you're saying, I mean, it's a huge issue, and the city is aware of it. I'm thinking about the policies that have been discussed recently about tents and about trying to stop handing out tents and handing out tarps to homeless people.
Mm-hmm.
Then the reason that city government has been giving for that change in policy is because they want to stop fires, which, like, to me, sort of goes both ways. Shows that this really is a big issue, but that
Is it tense though?
maybe,
Like what's catching?
but
You know what I mean? Because what we just
exactly,
discussed was
yeah,
an entire bridge on
yeah,
fire, and so
yeah,
was it because there was tents inside this bridge, or I feel like you're living
yeah. Probably
outside.
not a tent.
Yeah, you're
Hmm.
living outside and you're cooking outside, and maybe you're not in your right mind, or you're not paying it. Something's happening. I can imagine that could start a fire, but I don't know, Sophie. I mean, I don't know if the stats actually went in and were just like these were started by tents. I can imagine that something would have to catch fire, and if that's all they have, like that's probably what's going to catch fire.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of things can catch
Yeah,
fire,
that's
you
true.
know?
Yeah.
And I guess statistically speaking, it would likely be a tent or a tarp, but you're right. If you're high, or if you're whatever and you have a big coat on, that can catch
Hmm.
fire. You might not notice. I mean, who knows? And I don't know if there are statistics about what exactly caught fire that led to these injuries. I have no clue, but I think it's also interesting. The Fire Bureau has really kind of struggled with what to do about the fires themselves, because they understand that people light these fires to either A, cook food, or two, warm themselves. So they're not particularly, they don't really crack down on the fires themselves. So it's interesting that what they go to is sort of like, one step removed from the fire, and that they're trying to eliminate like the thing that might be catching fire or might not be catching fire rather than the fire itself.
Yeah, but I feel like a lot of policy is created that way. Is just like, okay, let's take away the tangential thing that is closest to the problem rather than the root of why they need to be starting all these fires. I think that's a really, really valid point. I thought when I just saw the pictures, and what I thought it was underground, but no, you guys, it's in the bridge, like it's in the base of the bridge.
Mhm.
It's not really underground, is it? It's like floor level, but just inside the bridge.
That's my understanding. The pictures are a little confusing, but
I'm kind of impressed. Like that's a lot of brick and cement or whatever they're making that bridge out of to like.
it also makes sense though. Like if I were homeless and I were living adjacent to the bridge and I could find my way into a place that actually had a roof and like probably protect you from it's a windbreaker.
Yeah.
I'm sure it acted as a windbreaker. I don't know. Like
Hmm.
if I were resourceful enough, I think I'd do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and a way to sort of create a permanent or semi-permanent home in a city that increasingly is hostile to people that are out in public view.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting. I thought it was just going to be, you were going to be like, there was a fire in the bridge, but then you have to connect all these pieces.
Hmm.
Well, so my headline this week is it's a story that comes from Amelia Templeton, who's this really smart health reporter from OPB. And right now she's doing a series about the biggest social and economic challenges facing Oregon. So the article that Amelia put out this Wednesday, she pointed out that though illegal substances are part of like our state's general addiction problem, that when it comes like to the end part of the stats, like, well, what's the biggest killer? It's actually alcohol. And I know I've heard that, like, like, oh, it's, the secret killer because in our society and in our culture, it's just so accepted. I don't know, like, here are the stats.
Mhm.
On average, 6 people die each day in Oregon from alcohol-related issues. And that includes like drunk driving, acute alcohol poisoning, but those are just a small fraction. The majority are to the long-term effects that are probably growing in our bodies right now, whoever's drinking, which includes like alcoholic liver disease, heart disease, and cancer. That kind of like shocked me a little, just because just coming from like where I come from with like bands and stuff, like alcohol is fun, and it's it's a party. I still feel like I'm 20 in a way. I'm not drinking every night,
Mhm.
but there's something to me that it's so inoffensive and so innocent.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I feel that so hard. I mean, I was a bartender for many
Mhm.
years, and like I definitely feel that most of the people coming in were exactly what you're saying, Claudia, that it was a place to celebrate, that it was a way to connect with people, and I think that that's all really true. But you also would occasionally see people where you're just like, are you doing okay? Are you doing all right? Like, are you sure you want to be here right now? And I think the thing that's tricky and like why it's so surprising is that it can be so invisible,
Mhm.
that like for people who do have a problem, it's not like some sort of like cartoon, melodramatic thing. It's that like there are a lot of people who have real problems with alcohol that are totally functional, that are going about their daily lives, that are in our lives.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that we all know somebody who like has stopped drinking, and you're just like, oh, you just have no idea that person
Yeah.
had even difficulty with it. So yeah, I mean,
I
I
think
think
alcohol is like so embedded in our like social
Mhm.
fabric, and it's still kind of a cool thing,
Yeah.
like if you go to a bar and get a glass of wine, it's not like it's not the same stigma. I mean, there's no stigma. There's like a
None.
positive stigma
Yeah.
associated with it, rather than if you were to go to a bar and like pull out a little bit of meth.
Exactly. Just a little bit. Just a
I
little
mean,
bit. Yeah.
right. And a lot of people like survive on alcohol, honestly, to be social, which sounds kind of a bummer, but like it does make you more fun sometimes.
No, well, Sophie, I living alone because my partner's like going to school in a different state. And so in order for me to see other people at the end of a long workday, I have to go to where the people are, and they are at a wine bar. They are at a bar. And as of late, I'm just like, I don't always have to come here and get a drink. It's like not necessary, whenever I'm out. So I started doing that, and I realized I was like, oh, I was just drinking because it was like a custom. Like I sit here but I was like, but there's so many non-alcoholic choices, and I can also do that. And guess what? I'm still hanging out with my friends.
Mhm,
Mhm.
mhm.
But the little secret, like, I think you said, John, that it was like almost an invisible issue that we don't talk
Mhm.
enough about. Something that the chief executive of behavioral health for Providence, the doctor basically stated like alcohol is the great dirty little secret of the pandemic, basically stating the pandemic kind of
Mm,
really increased something that was already an issue. And I
I'm sure.
have to
Yeah.
agree that I started drinking a lot more after the pandemic.
I think all our vices came to the forefront during COVID,
Yeah.
though. Like,
mean,
I don't
same,
think that
totally.
was.
Yeah.
I think alcohol is just one of the more accessible ones because it can be cheap. You don't have to buy nice alcohol. You can
Mhm.
get $3 Chuck at Trader
Mhm.
Joe's and have a fun night. But
I remember when it was $2 Chuck.
it was before my
Oh,
time.
okay.
Not to make you feel old, but
Sophie,
I no, you look very young.
maybe I was drinking when I was 16, Sophie.
Maybe.
Yeah, the thing that I really enjoyed about this article was that it didn't just state the problem, it also was like, and here are some reasons why. Amelia noted a lack of public detox and treatment programs as a significant factor as to why Oregon might be one of the worst in the United States. Because it's not like, of course, just us, but she's stating that it's harder for substance abuse for people to get help here, which I didn't know. And I think a lot of it is because here's the deal. And this is like, I was like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. Our alcohol is really cheap, right?
I actually remember a statistic that came out that we saw last week that we are the 45th in terms of the cost of beer in the country. So we are like in the bottom 5 of like the cost of beer.
Yeah. Which is why when people from New York come, they're like, I'm sorry, how much for this lager? And we're just like, yeah, welcome to Portland. But, but so, one strategy that she discussed was that we actually maybe start taxing alcohol. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Like if all of a sudden a pint of beer was like $12, like how it is in other states,
kind of all for vice taxes, actually. I think that is like maybe an unpopular position, but like, I don't have a problem with it.
My one concern, like, I think I'd be in support of it, but that's also because, like, the only thing I enjoy drinking is wine. I wouldn't be affected by it, but I do wonder, like, I think when you're an addict, price doesn't matter, and you're gonna buy it anyways when you have an addiction, and like, especially for people who, like, that might send more people into like economic hardship if they're going to buy it anyways, and now they're paying double what they would have paid before. I just wonder if it would sort of compound the issues for the people. I don't know.
But I don't know. So here's the deal: is that the federal government actually conducted some research on what you just stated, and they actually found strong evidence that taxes do curb drinking because they've actually curbed smoking. But again, is it correlated to people just realizing like, oh crap, this is going to give me cancer? Like it was a cultural social shift where we're just like, oh, smoking is not good for us. On top of that, here's this tax. So is it a correlation or was it the tax?
Yeah. I mean, and I think it's also a question of like, let's say we do raise those taxes and try and put them into substance abuse prevention and treatment. Like we just saw through the implementation of Measure 109, which was the bill that decriminalized a whole bunch of illicit drugs in Oregon, that was supposed to, put more money into and create more treatment options. The state was really, really slow on getting those treatment options up and going. And I feel like it's still a mixed bag in terms of how much there is. So, I mean, I just want to point out that like we do not have a good track record of like building in these support services when we say we're going to.
Yeah. Well, one last thing I'll say before we get to your headline, John, is that Representative Tana Sanchez, she actually in 2021 attempted to pass like a tax increase, and it was Oregon beer and wine, so wine would be affected. I'm sorry, Sophie. You can change your answer now that you know that your wine's going to get more expensive.
yeah, scrap it.
She's just drinking White Claw from now on.
Nope, yeah.
No, that's going to be, dude, anything with alcohol. I love it. You're like, White Claw isn't alcohol. It's spicy seltzer.
Wait, so there's alcohol in this?
But and it was like knocked down. So who knows? Because I think that our industry's pretty strong here. So we'll see what ends up happening. All right, let's take a break here. When we come back, more headlines of the week.
The Explore the Tropics event is in full swing now at Whole Foods Market. It's a celebration of tropical fruits throughout the store, starting with great deals on fresh, juicy seasonal produce. There's a new melty tropical heat pizza only at Whole Foods Market through March. And that famous mango yuzu chantilly cake is finally back in the bakery department. You'll also find tempting tropical marinated proteins in their meat and seafood departments. Explore the tropics today at Whole Foods Market.
So, John, what headline caught your eye?
Yeah, I mean, I got pretty interested in this article by Noelle Crombie over at the Oregonian, talking about intoxicated driving prosecutions. Basically, the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office, the Oregonian got their hands on a memo from them, and it said, I'm just going to quote directly from this memo from the DA, quote, alarming number of DUIs that cannot be prosecuted because the police did not attempt to perform any of the routine investigation expected in a DUI crash, such as a breath test or evidentiary blood draw. So basically what it's asserting is that like the Portland police just aren't doing the sort of intoxication tests in, basically what this is asserting is 1 in 5 stops. And that prevents the DA from actually being able to prosecute these people, which, I mean, for me, just raises a whole bunch of questions. But I'm curious what strikes you there.
Immediately, you're like, okay, is this part of the like quote unquote, quiet quitting of the police, or like, is this somehow correlated to the fact that they stopped enforcing traffic laws? But to me, I'm just like, this is not a traffic law. This is driving while under the influence. Like when we had Mingus Maps on, he was saying like, hey, if there's more traffic enforcement, we'll be able to focus more on this. But I'm like, but this is not a lower level offense. This is a very high level offense that the police officers should be, paying attention to and should be making sure that go through the prosecution process.
I think what's so interesting is like, I think there's so much rhetoric out there and debate about you know, a lot of people will say Mike Schmidt's not prosecuting. Mike Schmidt's not prosecuting. He's not prosecuting drug crimes, property crimes, driving crime, whatever. But I think what's so interesting and what I think people don't necessarily connect is like the DA needs evidence that the police conduct the investigation for the most part. And the DA will not go forward with prosecuting something if the police have not basically put together a convincing case. And I think that's something that's kind of missed because cops are the first step. Cops are the ones who do the arrest, and cops are the one who oftentimes build the case in order to convince the DA, hey, you can prosecute this. And so, you know, at least in the driving impairment, like that's what's happening is the cops aren't doing, even sometimes it seems like pretty, you know, basic investigation on these impaired drivers in order to get it to a place to where the DA can prosecute.
And what's the end run there? Like, what are they benefiting from this? And I just want to say that Mike Schmidt is the Multnomah County DA, in case you're wondering why you're hearing his name over and over again.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this is like part of what's so puzzling to me. Like, if it was just a situation where they weren't doing the stops, right? If these arrests were not being made, if these traffic stops were not happening, that would sort of fit in line with some of the things that we've heard the city was going to do anyways, that they were going to stop doing certain numbers of traffic stops, they said a couple of years ago. But these stops are happening, right? These people are still getting pulled over. They're still getting arrested. And, you know, like, frankly, like, traffic stops are one of the most dangerous things a police officer can do. Like, a police officer is a lot more likely to get hit by another car while doing a traffic stop than in almost any other situation. So the arrests are still happening, but these DUI tests, you know, these blood draws, these breathalyzers aren't occurring. Yeah. So for me, it's something that just like raises a lot more questions. And I'm hoping to see more reporting on it. Yeah.
But that's interesting because our DUIs are a bit like on the higher side. So I don't know, guys. I'm a little nervous that the police knows this. Why wouldn't they want the streets to be safer? And just in that respect. Because I agree. Yeah. I mean, I remember when we had Commissioner Mingus Mapps on, we discussed like, hey, we understand why the police, you know, why the Portland police was just like, hey, we're not going to waste time with these lower traffic enforcements for all the things, you know, like that you said. It's really dangerous. And also the sentiment is like less cops because it's so biased when they do pull over anyone. It's usually just like a person of color. And that's a factual statement. But I remember Commissioner Mapps being like, hey, man, they're brave. That's pretty much what I heard, you know, like they're going to do their jobs. But if they're actually doing the most dangerous part of stopping them and then not completing that action, yeah, I mean, I'm just going to say it. It sounds like they're not doing their job.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I have heard rumors about quiet quitting, about the Portland Police Bureau sort of in protest of some of the discourse that's been going on of trying to consciously do less arrests. And like,
this one doesn't make sense to me though, because I think,
yeah, go on.
You know, like you're right. If they did the hardest part and this is the easiest part, which I mean, I think it's the easiest part. I think it's a breathalyzer is what Amelia wrote, but Noel wrote.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just like, I feel like it, I don't know. That doesn't really make sense to me that would be the part where they're skimping on their job if they're slow walking things. It just doesn't really add up. I don't know.
One other thing that did jump out at me that I thought was interesting, which I kind of knew but hadn't like really put numbers behind it, is it also said that there's been this sort of countywide precipitous decrease in misdemeanors being charged. 12,000 or so in 2019, down to like 4,000 in 2022, which again is like just a really dramatic statistic. And I think that there's a lot of reasons for that. But I hadn't really wrapped my head around those numbers before, and it jumped out at me.
I mean, I wonder what the lack of resources are at the police department, if it's staffing or because it's definitely not money. They've gotten the largest budget they've ever gotten. So I don't know. I'm curious. Maybe we should have someone from the police on the show.
I mean, I think the police bureau is one of those bureaus that it's really hard to get them on the record about anything that they don't really want to talk about.
Well, new goal, John. Let's land someone from the police. To me, I'm just like, hey, John, go for it.
My email fingers are flexing right now.
Yeah. If it happens, Sophie will let you know, and you could send over some questions you've been pondering.
I will.
Cool. Well, guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me. It's always a pleasure to have you on, Sophie, and of course, John. It's always fun to both be on the mic.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and
I appreciate it.
And welcome back, Claudia, because we missed you. You've been out for the last week, so welcome back.
Where'd you go?
Oh, I was also sick, Sophie, but it wasn't COVID.
Oh.
It was just a really boring head cold of some sort. I don't know. What if I was just like,
I wish it were more exciting.
Yeah, if I was just like Bermuda and you guys were like, what? Like it just came out. Like I was like, oops. I mean. Thank you so much for listening and hanging out with us this week. Our lead producer is John Notarianni. Our audio producer is Julia Fiaioni. Our newsletter editor is Rachel Monahan. And our host is me, Claudia Meza. Original music by Jenny Conley and Steven Drizos. Additional music by Epidemic Sound. We'll be back in a few days with more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.